Welcome to the Dr. Broadway Podcast, the musical theater history podcast where a couple of doctors sit around and talk about Broadway. I'm your co-host, Dr. Kristin Stultz Pressley, joined as always by Dr. Tracey Brent-Chessum. Tracey, we have a juggernaut to talk about today.
Yes, we do.
Tell us what it is.
Most definitely. Today, we talk about the iconic Mamma Mia. We actually changed the order that we were going to do these in, mostly because I realized that for the first episode of the second season, we referenced Mamma Mia quite a bit. And since it was on our list already, I was like, perhaps we should back up and talk about it.
Yeah, that's a great idea. That's a great idea.
I mean, I thought it was very interesting, not to get to the point. Maybe we should just start getting to the point a little quicker. Maybe the episodes wouldn't be so long, but
would they be as fun?
Maybe
would they
not.
Be as fun?
Not at all.
Yeah, exactly.
I kind of felt like there was, how did you say this last time? You said this is Mamma Mia is not by any chance the first jukebox musical.
Right.
You said, that it was the one that really kind of cemented it as a genre. And it is its own thing. The more we sit around and talk about jukebox musicals, they have their own internal structure, and they have their own way that they work, and their own way of staying faithful to what has come before. But you're right. I mean, Mamma Mia, by all means, is not the very first. There's long history of people trying to do jukebox musicals to kind of save musical theater after the devastation of AIDS. Let's just be kind of honest about that. But in the mid 90s, there's lots and lots of these little jukebox musicals that are being thrown at the wall. People just trying to figure out and make something work. And lo and behold, what makes it work?
Mamma Mia. So. Yeah. Well, and you're exactly right on the timing of that. Throughout Broadway history, we'd seen these kind of catalog musicals. I don't even know that the term jukebox musical existed.
Yeah.
But catalog musicals is what they would be called when they would take a catalog of music by any different writer or writers and try to make a show. And I love that you pointed out the timing of post-AIDS, because that's where we get 1992, we get Crazy for You.
Yeah.
And what Crazy for You was attempting to do, I mean, you talked about this in our last season, where you talked about kind of the British invasion, right? Where so many American creators were either sick or had died of AIDS and were unable thereby to create. So then we have Andrew Lloyd Webber and all those Cameron Mackintosh, Les Mis and Miss Saigon and all of those shows that are filling in the gaps. And so there's some really fascinating quotes that I found as I was writing my book, Jukebox Musicals, talking about we're losing our American heritage here. We got to get it back. And so one of the things, it wasn't the only thing that producer Roger Horchow was attempting to do when he came up with Crazy for You in 1992. But one of the things was, let's put a stake in the ground and say, wait a minute, Great Britain, this is ours. Mm-hmm. And so he used the Gershwin's Most American of Music in order to create this catalog jukebox musical called Crazy for You. Again, not the first, but certainly one that we can point to and say was doing something really special and got a lot of attention. It was very, very popular.
Yeah, it was.
So you're exactly right.
What's that? It had Ariel.
It did. Jodie Benson.
So
it sure enough did.
It sure enough did.
Boy,
and
that voice.
Even in 92 had become so iconic.
Oh, gosh.
They came out in what, 88?
Little Mermaid?
Little Mermaid.
In 89. 89, I think. So, it was 88 or 89.
But that movie cemented the return of, the Disney musical, and her voice was iconic at that point.
Yeah. I mean, I wish I had $1 for every time I drove around in my car listening to that CD, trying to sound just like her.
Wow. Yeah.
And failing miserably.
It's really funny. Little caveat there, she has emerged back onto the musical theater scene now that her kids are basically through college and doing their own careers and stuff, trying to I don't know if she's trying to help launch them, but she has done some stuff with her daughter. But, I saw a video recently of her daughter playing Ariel in a musical somewhere, and her going to see it, and people getting her reactions to her daughter, which is, I think that's kind of fun, y'all. Like the human aspect of it, being able to kind of pass that down. That's good. And Delaney, her daughter, is very good. I have never actually seen her perform, but everybody tells me she is very, very talented. So,
well, I have followed her on social media just because of loving her mother. I've followed her on social media for a number of years. Her name, by the way, is Delaney Benson. So if you're wondering, who are we talking about? Jodi Benson's daughter is named Delaney Benson, and she has a degree from the Cincinnati Conservatory of Music. So a very accomplished performer in her own right. And she is doing now concerts with her mom. She has performed multiple productions of Gypsy with her mom. And then Tracy's right. I think it was somewhere maybe down near Miami or Key West or somewhere. That she did The Little Mermaid. And what's so amazing, you can find tons of videos of her on TikTok. This is a rabbit trail, Lord have mercy, but let's go with it.
Let's rabbit trail about something other than us. That's fine too.
But Delaney Benson, you can go to her TikTok or her Instagram, and she shares clips of her. And she recently played, I don't know if it was for a showcase or what, I can't remember, but she sits at the piano and she plays, I think it was Beautiful from Carole King, if not, it was one of the songs from Beautiful, the Carole King musical. And she's playing the piano and she sings, and there are times when she sounds exactly like Jodi. And you're like, is that Jodi Benson? But then there's other times when she sounds so unique and like someone completely different. But regardless of whether she sounds like Jodi or like someone else, she is really gifted. Like her voice is beautiful. So go check her out on TikTok. This is not a paid advertisement by the Benson family.
For the Benson family in any way, shape, or form. Oh my goodness. That was very much a bunny trail. Anyway.
It was. But I wonder, I always wondered,
we're going to have to start calling out more artists that we know and be like, they're really good too. Go follow them.
That's very true. Very true.
We try hard not to do that,
so many of my favorites are from the olden days, like 1992.
And it's like I've got all of these little young ones that are, just doing things, and you want to kind of call them out and jump up and down for them. But
yeah, absolutely.
We also don't want to. I don't know, it comes back to the idea for the podcast, doesn't it? It's just, we're not trying to alienate anybody by being like, ooh, I know this person.
Right.
Just so you know, they're very cool. We don't know Delaney Benson, y'all.
I have never met Jodi or Delaney Benson.
Nope, not at all. So
I have sung along with Jodi many, many times in my car, as I previously mentioned.
Love it. Anyway, moving on. Let's get back from this bunny trail where we were talking about...
What were we talking about?
I mean, we're talking about like what happens after the British invasion. Why the British invasion happens. What happens afterwards. We see people stepping into the gap, and we have a lot of... I mean, if you've listened to our early episodes from season 1, you know that we had quite a few... female composing teams actually step into the fray here and start creating musicals like The Secret Garden, which is gorgeous and beautiful and doesn't really get its due. I think sometimes we forget about it a little bit too much.
I agree. I'm surprised there hasn't been a major revival of that yet.
I know. Well, part of it is because of the identity politics.
Okay.
In it.
It
is
that
difficult
makes sense
to do, but
yeah, that makes sense.
You have to kind of deal with some of that issue, and I think that's why we haven't seen it. But it is
that makes sense.
But like as a historical piece, you look at it and go, "Oh my gosh, this was so great for this particular time." But there are major just standalone pieces, in the early 90s, mid 90s. There's really not lots that gets going until you get Rent in 96, and it's still slim pickings. You get Ragtime after that, and then it starts to explode. Early 2001, 2002, it actually kind of recovers itself. You get kind of a generation that has been mentored, and you're making up some of those gains, but it is a tough time on Broadway. I think I mentioned this last season when one of the first times I taught musical theater history. We spent an entire day, and I made them write out all the musicals that opened on Broadway between like 92 and 99. And like, you would think, okay, you get an average of maybe 20 if you're lucky. So maybe there's going to be 100. There were something like 500 titles on the boards because they would open and close and open and close and open and close. Talk about throwing things at the wall. So in that background, and looking back at what you were saying about producers kind of going, this was ours. This little musical theater thing was ours. It's not British.
Yes.
Like, we need to find our feet here, friends. Yeah. And trying to bring back the Americanness of it. The Jukebox musical, very American. The thing that kicks it off is not American at all, is it?
Isn't that ironic?
It always happens that way, though.
Isn't that ironic?
We always
Swedish rock band or pop band brought to us by a British producer, and British director and British librettist.
I think we're often like that in the history of musical theater. In the history of theater, we see what other people are doing, and it takes us 10 or 15 years to kind of wrap our brains around it, and then once we've wrapped our brains around it, we're able to make it ours and then run off with it. So
yeah. I don't want to belabor the crazy for you thing, but I do want to read. I talked about that, I'd found some interesting quotes about that. And I want to read what Frank Rich wrote in his review for Crazy for You. He said this. Frank Rich, of course, famed New York Times reporter. When future historians try to find the exact moment at which Broadway finally rose up to grab the musical back from the British, they just may conclude that the revolution began last night. The shot was fired at the Schubert Theater, where a riotously entertaining show called Crazy for You uncorked the American musical's classic blend of music, laughter, dancing, sentiment, and showmanship with a freshness and confidence rarely seen during the Cats decade. And he goes on, but I'll save that for those who read the book. He goes on to, talk some more about that. But it is interesting that it was, they're acknowledging exactly what you've talked about last season, a lot about that decade really was lost because of AIDS. So, okay, having said all of that, let's now talk about Mamma Mia, because Tracey's absolutely right that we should have started here. And I should have thought of that. I tell you, when I made the list, what I did was I went alphabetically. Yeah. And so that, of course, meant Anne Juliet was very first. But I should have thought to put Mamma Mia first, because Mamma Mia is, the grand dame of
I didn't catch that either. I mean, sometimes it's like, ooh, here's everything that's there. This is the way we can do it. I remember you saying, would you do it in a different order? And I'm like, no, I think this is wonderful. And now we're both like, oh, wait,
this doesn't work.
We should have done.
This doesn't work. But I do want to reiterate something that came up last week, if you have listened to the Anne Juliet episode, where I mentioned that jukebox musicals take one of two shapes. One is they're either a complete fantasy sort of story, and that's the Mamma Mia mold, or we've developed this sort of offshoot where we have the biomusical, and we're seeing more and more and more of those as time goes by. And we'll talk about one specifically in our next episode of Beautiful Noise, the Neil Diamond musical, where it's a biomusical. Now, the fantastic, in terms of the 21st century explosion of jukebox musicals. You can say that Crazy for You is the grand dam of the fantasy story, and Jersey Boys
There
is
you
the
go. Okay.
grand duke of biomusicals, right?
Yeah.
Because here's what happened. I mentioned this last week. With Mamma Mia, everybody who had an expansive catalog of music suddenly said, well, wait a minute, can I turn that into a $1 billion musical?
Yeah.
But then with Jersey Boys, people started saying, wait a minute, and we'll talk more about this when we talk about Neil Diamond next week. But people started saying, wait a minute, can I use this to leave a legacy of my music?
Yeah.
Right? So they're doing two very different things. And those are the two molds that we have at play. Mamma Mia, of course, as I said, is the grand dam of the fantasy jukebox musical because it's an entirely fictionalized story, though based on a film from, I believe, the 60s. So, Tracy, anything you want to say before I take off on this one?
Um, just that we do come back. I like that we have started with Crazy for You. And the reason why is because it is very much, it does fit the definition of the jukebox musical, but but it is a different type of musical legacy there. Whereas, they took a theater, basically theater composers right there.
Yeah,
and so
absolutely.
so many of their songs are already set up for kind of structural. So even if you take them out of the shows, it's like, oh well, this served as a 11 o'clock number, this served as an I Want song,
Right.
or it served as this, that, and the other thing. So they had a little bit more framework to work with to actually make it work. Once we get to Mamma Mia and the ones that follow, we're talking about music that was created to be consumed. It was about
Right.
consumption. It wasn't about telling a story. It was about maybe telling a story in 3.5 minutes, not a longer narrative.
Yes.
So it is much harder to structure a jukebox musical.
Yeah.
Especially if you don't have somebody who's kind of writing material in and amongst to kind of put it all together. Musicals are beasts, and sometimes they can feel. I think the biggest complaint that I hear about jukebox musicals in general is just that the book is weak, right? It's
of
like
course.
the story's not really there, and it's like it's just because it's very hard to do when you're only allowed to use music from that wasn't designed to tell a long form story. So when they can do it and when it works, oh gosh, like all those fireworks go off. And so, what we're seeing now and what we're going to talk about with Mamma Mia really does kind of showcase that, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I want to mention the economics of Broadway. Crazy for You cost in 1992. Crazy for You cost, I want to say 700 or 750,000, one or the other to produce.
It did not have a huge set or anything. I mean,
No,
as I remember,
no, it had massive dance numbers. It was really
Okay, well, it was-
Susan Stroman was the choreographer.
So I mean, you had the full chorus back,
You did, and
putting
very
people to work. Very very smart.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
I mean,
s-
set wise, I mean, I just remember it was drop heavy. Like
It was drop heavy,
Okay.
drop heavy. Absolutely,
It
absolutely.
wasn't like we're building.
There's
Spider-Man
no
in any way, shape, or
turntable,
form. No
right?
turntable. Yeah. Okay.
There's not a staircase or chandelier or
that
a
falls
helicopter.
out from under the.
None of that.
None of that stuff. Okay.
None of that. And in that way, it does harken back to those kind of Gershwin style musicals from the 20s and 30s. But at any rate, I bring that up to say, musicals in 92 were $750,000. And in my book, I'm trying to find it. I can't find it. But of course, I adjusted it for inflation. And of course, when I need to find it, I can't. But it was obviously not on par with what a musical costs today. In the intervening years,
if this is your first episode, you will realize that Kristin loves to do this. She loves to tell you what it would be in today's dollars.
I gotta tell you,
it's always so great.
Well, I will tell you why. Because $700,000 in 1992, you're like, well, that doesn't seem like that much money as I'm sitting here in 2025. But if you adjust it for inflation, it helps you to kind of get an apples to apples perspective on it. So yes,
Yes,
I'm a
it's
big
very
fan of
helpful.
doing that. It does help because you could think, oh, $750,000, I'll produce that musical. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But then when you think about it, you're like, well, that was different. It was a different barometer back then.
Yeah.
Anyway, but it still is not the same kind of number today. And so one of the reasons why jukebox musicals are appealing to producers is because it's music that's already been created. So we don't have to hire. Now, this is why a lot of musical theater purists will say, whoa, ho, 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 we're not creating any original music. But a producer will say, well, hell, we've already got the music created. So we're saving that money. Granted, we have to pay for the rights to use it, but we're not paying for somebody to create it. So ideally, it should be less expensive and take less time to produce, right?
Not
Ideally.
not if you're doing it right.
Okay.
The purist in me is coming out.
Yeah, no, I understand. I totally understand. And I'm kind of on the fence because inside of me lives a purist, but then outside of me, there is a fan of Mamma Mia.
You know what? But I mean, I'm with you on that. Like, I feel the same way. It's like there's some parts of things that, you look at in theater history that you go, this is just rubbing me the wrong way, and it should because I'm right, but I'm having so much fun.
Exactly.
So who cares?
Exactly.
Look at all these people having so much fun.
Exactly. So anyway, that's not a conversation for today, although we may end up having it later.
You never know.
The conversation for today is the development of Mamma Mia. All right, so where shall we begin? Well, let's begin with the music of ABBA. So ABBA, actually, as I mentioned, is a Swedish pop group. They got their starts. It's a quartet, really. It's 4 people. Their names are Annie Fried Lingstad, or Frida, Benny Andersson, who wrote most of their, probably all of their music, Bjorn Ulvaeus, who wrote the lyrics, and Agnetha Feltskog, who was on vocals like Annie Fried was, or like Frida was. So they got their start around 1966. Now, each of these individual performers, 2 men, 2 women, were having solo careers, maybe part of different groups. They were all doing their own thing in the 60s in Sweden. And as time went by, they began to intersect with one another. And so, they would start to pair up. In fact, they got their chance to perform together really for one of the first times in 1970. They were told, if you'll come perform for us, the 4 of you, you can have a free vacation. And so they were all for that. So they thought, what do we have to lose? So they went and they performed in Cyprus. I believe it was in Cyprus. I could be wrong. Yes, Cyprus. So they went, they did it. They did it, a cabaret act of cover songs, not original music. But nevertheless, it was a chance for them to sing together. The 4 of them came together for the first time when they had been individual acts, pursuing their own individual acts or parts of other bands. They acknowledged after this that they weren't doing their best work then, but it would lead to better things to come. So they were then performing under the title of Bjorn and Benny, Agnetha and Annie Fried. And they started, as time went by, Bjorn, who wrote the lyrics, and Benny, who wrote music, started writing their own music, and the band would perform that. And they started to realize this is what we need to do. This is who we are. We are going to write our own style, our own brand of pop music, and see what happens with this. So this is all happening in the early 1970s. Well, then comes the Melodifestivalen, which is Sweden's kind of entrance contest for the Eurovision Song Contest. Tracey, are you familiar with Eurovision? Tell me what you know about Eurovision. If anything, because I didn't know anything until this book.
I'm going to hide like students and look down. And I mean, I know Eurovision is a thing, like, and everybody's like, oh, this person won the Eurovision and they're from this country. And I just always assumed it was kind of like American Idol, and it's
very similar.
We're being kind of silly and didn't want to participate as Americans.
Right. No, it's very similar. No,
it's just Europe.
It's just, well, it's not just
Hence,
Europe, but it's not, we don't, Americans
yeah.
do not. And the reason for that is because it is part of the European broadcasting system. So in the
Oh,
mid 1950s, as they, we found this in our own country where we started to have our own system of broadcasting. Well, their equivalent of that, they had all of these different networks, across the continent of Europe. And then subsequently, like in New Zealand and Australia, I believe, where there was the European Broadcasting Network, similar to our PBS sort of thing.
hmm.
And all of the countries that were part of that could have a contest, and the winner of each country's contest would then go compete in what was called the Eurovision Song Contest, and it was held in different places across Europe. And then there would be a grand winner of the Eurovision Song Contest. Now this is where we got Riverdance,
Are you
believe it or
serious?
not. They did not win the competition, but Riverdance was performed at the intermission, of 7-minute intermission performance in 1994.
No way.
Yes, when the Eurovision Song Contest was held in Dublin, they're like, we'll give them a little local flair. Here's some Irish dancing, and people went crazy for the Irish dancing.
Hmm.
So by 1995, Riverdance is its own production unto itself. But it was also launched because of the Eurovision
Riverdance.
Song Contest. So in 1972, the four of them go and they participate in the Melody Festivalen, which is what you had to win in Sweden in order to go to the Eurovision Song Contest.
Hmm.
They lost, but in 1973 they went back and they performed an original number written by Benny and Bjorn, and it was called Waterloo. And maybe you've heard of it.
Huh.
And when they performed Waterloo at the 1973 Eurovision Song Competition, they won. They beat Olivia Newton-John. How about that? So
Wait,
that's why I
wait,
say it
wait,
wasn't
wait,
just
wait.
Europeans. Australians were involved as well.
They beat
Olivia
Olivia
Newton-John.
Newton-John in the Swedish one? Did
No,
I
no,
get
no, no,
messed
no. In
up?
the
Oh,
Eurovision,
in the
so they
Eurovision.
won the sweet. They
Okay.
won the. I'm sorry, I didn't make that clear.
No, I
They
just was like,
won.
oh no, now I'm lost.
They won. Remember, I'm a theater historian,
I
not
know.
a geographer.
I'm with
No,
you.
they won. I didn't make this clear. I'm sorry about that. They won the Melody Festival in Sweden,
Okay.
and then represented Sweden in the Eurovision Song Contest in 1973.
And won
And that
that.
was the year they won the Eurovision Song Contest.
Okay.
They beat Olivia
Olivia Newton-John.
Newton-John, and they performed Waterloo, their song
Okay.
Waterloo. And you can imagine, and this is what happened with Riverdance as well, because you've got all the TVs in that are connected to the European Broadcasting Network tuned into this. There were hundreds of millions of people watching
Hmm.
this contest, and it happens every year. I mean, it's enormously popular. You're right. It's similar in a lot of ways to an American Idol kind of thing, because it is people who vote on what is the best production, what is the best performer.
Yeah.
And so in 1973, when ABBA wins it, by then they're known as ABBA, and that, which is, by the way, if you don't know, it is their names.
The first initial of their names. Yeah.
Yeah, Agnetha, uh, Benny, Bjorn, and Annie Fried. So it's ABBA. Um, and so they're known as ABBA. They perform an original song. They're the first band, not solo act, to win the European or the Eurovision Song Contest.
Hmm.
So it's a big deal, but it's also a massively big stage. And so it catapults them almost overnight to superstardom. I mean, it was not long at all before certainly Waterloo was all over the charts. But then they had songs very quickly after, all written by Benny and Bjorn. Hits like Honey Honey and
Hmm.
Mamma Mia and SOS and all of those songs that we know and love from the musical that became Mamma Mia, they're churning them out like nobody's business, right?
Yeah. To
And so
capitalize.
naturally, the next step is for them to go on a tour. And so they, in fact, do. They go on a world tour. They're selling out. It's outrageously successful. Everybody loves them, except, interestingly, the US.
We're like,
And
we
I
don't
allude,
watch this stuff. Who are these people?
right, Swedish pop stars, we've got our own things. Um, but it's interesting. We talked about this a little bit last week, um, but I'll get more into it in just a moment when we get to this point of the story. But they never really had the kind of success in the States that they had elsewhere. And, when they would say, why don't you come and open for whomever? They're like, no, 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 no. We're not playing the US until we can open our own shows. We're not opening for other people. We are the headliners.
Mm-hmm.
And so as a result, their success in the US was delayed when all over the world it was massively popular. You know who had a similar trajectory, well, if we're talking about jukebox musicals, was Gloria Estefan and the Miami Sound Machine.
Mm-hmm.
They were popular the world over. She talks about how they would go play for 50,000 people in Argentina, and then they'd come back home to Miami and do a wedding reception. Isn't that outrageous? What is it with American audiences? Are you kidding me?
We need to be courted. Let's be honest. We do. And
Yes.
we are those infuriating people that need to make sure.
Yes. Without a doubt. So they continued doing what they were doing because it was working. They were touring and producing songs, more hits like Fernando and Dancing Queen and Knowing Me, Knowing You and Take a Chance on Me and Does Your Mother Know? All of these songs that we know either from that ABBA Gold album that came out in the early 90s or from Mamma Mia, or maybe if you're a niche independent film viewer, from Muriel's Wedding. It came out in 1994. All of those songs, they're just spitting them out, and they are so popular. Well, finally, in 1979, they decided it's time. We're going to the US. We're going to give it a try. And they were nervous about it, as you can imagine. How much egg on your face would you have if you are selling out every city in the world, but you come to Los Angeles or San Francisco
And
you can't get anybody in the door?
Well, first you have bad promoters.
Well, that's very
I
fair.
mean, like, what is going on with their marketing team? My goodness.
Right, right.
But the sound, I mean, the thing is that their sound, and they work extensively on it. I mean, I know from friends who've worked on the show that it's like their sound design is so specific.
Yes.
And it's a hallmark of what they do. Like, it's kind of written into contracts kind of thing. But they perfected that sound over a long period of time. They're very, very pleased with it. But, it's very different than the music that was going on in the United States. It's still very, very different when you hear the music of Mamma Mia. It's a different sound kaleidoscope than most things. And so, even with good promoters, like, did Americans even want to give them a chance? Because it is so different. It's not something that I mean, let's be honest. We're not really great at being like, ooh, this is the next new thing, and it's so different. It has no touch points to everything else that's going on right now, and not everybody has that ear. So I mean, I think that the more I read about it this week and started looking at it, it was like, okay, that sound design was, their sound kaleidoscope is very different than what was going on in the U.S. And the U.S. just didn't know what to do with it. It grew on them. But again, we like to be courted. It needs to grow on us first. So
that's a great point. And again, like I said, we saw it mirrored not less than a decade later with Gloria Estefan and the Miami Sound Machine. Mm-hmm. I mean, the exact same thing. Only the difference was Gloria Estefan, though not a native to Miami, had lived in Miami since she was a little bitty baby girl, so she might as well have been native to Miami. And still, just took a while to warm up to that. And then once American audiences did, of course, she just went,
it's like
haywire. Yeah. I love that you talked about their very specific sound, because as I was researching for my book chapter on Mamma Mia, I found what I think is the most spot on description of their music ever. It is from a music critic named Terry Lawson. And in his review of a greatest hits album that they put out in 1982 called The Singles, The First 10 Years, he described their sound this way. He said, The songs on this album sound as if they erupted fully formed from some magic musical mountain, spilling down the sides like so much bubbling champagne. Isn't that like a beautiful
That's
way to put it?
good job.
I
I mean,
know.
like
I
that's
love that.
somebody who understands words and like nicely done,
That's
critic.
a great image and so spot on for what they do. So, at any rate, like I said, they decide they're going to play America in 1979. They are going to tour North America. So, they're starting in Canada. They're going to tiptoe in, like they're going to
Yeah.
come in the back door, right?
Well, I mean,
So,
like you think about who they're up against. What in '79?
yeah.
I mean, we're starting to get like the birth of baby hair bands and like I mean
Michael Jackson is,
Michael
is solo at
Jackson.
this point.
But I
Yeah.
mean, and that's probably the thing that is the most helpful to them because in the true '70s in music, there's nothing that like gives them that step in, right?
Right.
It's not really until the '80s that we really start getting this development of pop,
Right.
right? So yeah, tiptoe in the back door, see what you can do. Let's see.
That's what they do. That's what they do. They start their first ever North American tour in September of 1979 at the Coliseum in Edmonton, Alberta. And they played 13 US cities and much of Europe for this tour before concluding in Japan at the end of March in 1980. Most shows sold out in an instant. Like this is, nowadays for a show to sell out in an instant is no big deal because it's all done online.
This
This
is
was a
hard
day
to
and
do.
age when you had to show up to buy tickets or call a box office.
Yep.
When most places didn't have,
Multi-
352 lines.
Yeah, no, you didn't get that either.
No.
Yeah. So
You
you
got
had
a
to go stand out there,
and you called back. You know what I mean? Those days. Those days.
The busy
So
signal.
yeah, exactly. So the fact that it sold out so instantly, so universally, was enormously gratifying to the band, of course. However, as is often the case, at the height of their popularity, they crumbled. The band itself crumbled. Now, there were two couples in the years since they met and when they became, international superstars. There were two couples. So Bjorn Ulvaeus and Feltskog divorced in 1978, and then Benny Anderson and Lingstad followed suit in 1981. So the couples had dissolved, and ultimately, you can imagine you're not going to continue singing with your ex-spouse, right? You can imagine how difficult that would be. So the band ended up dissolving in the early 1980s. That's when we see that Greatest Hits album come out in 1982, where it's kind of a capstone of this decade of producing incredible music.
I
It's
was like,
amazing to think
why
they
are we
did
doing
what they
greatest
did in a
hits
decade.
after
What's
a
that?
decade? I was like, that's interesting that it's like, oh, the relationships were falling apart. That makes sense.
Yes.
Because when you first said that, I went, wow, greatest hits after 10 years, they're done?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Yeah. But they can't coexist anymore because there's too
They
many
need
layers, you know, to the equation here with the dissolution of both of their marriages. So they end up going their separate ways. Agnetha and Anna Fried go back to their solo careers. They do their own thing, and they still are. You can still find, um, they'll still every now and then, not so much lately, but in the last 20 years, definitely we're still recording music. And then Benny and Bjorn continued to work together, and they started thinking about what can we do in musical theater?
Mm,
Because they had been, you talked about storytelling, and they saw themselves as telling stories in 3 minutes. But
yeah.
what they wanted to do was, can we stretch our storytelling to last over a wider span of time?
Hmm.
So they really wanted to see if they were up to that challenge. Now, in the book, I go into great detail about this. In the interest of time, because we've talked for a lot of time about Delaney Benson and
Yes.
other things. Not that I mind. I'm going to skip over that and leave, if you want to know more, read the book. But it's chapter 2 of Jukebox Musicals. But they come across the path of a man named Tim Rice. This is the early 1980s, remember? And if you know Tim Rice's biography, then you will know Tim Rice was a man in need of a collaborator as well. He had been collaborating from the late 1960s with Andrew Lloyd Webber. They had done shows like Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat and Jesus Christ Superstar and Evita. And that was really the end of them. For different reasons, they had broken up. Different reasons from ABBA's dissolution. Andrew Lloyd Webber and Tim Rice had decided to go their separate ways. And they would both say, it's not like one day we said we're done. It's just that they needed to do other things, right? They needed to not work together for a while. And so that's what they did. And so Tim Rice was looking for someone to work with, and Benny and Bjorn were looking for someone to work with. And Tim Rice had this idea for writing a musical about international intrigue, set against the backdrop of the Cold War, because it's still ongoing in the early 1980s. And he thought about a musical that would become what is the show Chess. So he starts thinking about this. He presents his ideas to Benny and Bjorn, and they decide, hey, let's go for it. Let's see what we can do together. And so indeed, as we all know now, Chess became a musical. You're laughing. What's behind that laughter?
It's just funny because chess is so beautiful. Like there's so much about it that it's like, as a historian and as somebody who does musical theater, I don't think I've even actually been able to see a full production of it. I've only been able to see like little bits of it because it is so cerebral and so tied to its historical moment.
Completely.
It's so very difficult to do and revive, and
yeah,
heck, it might be good now, but like in the intervening years, like
it's very difficult.
It's
And Tracey, I wonder if one of the reasons for that, and we've talked about this several times, including I think last week on And Juliet, when we talk about we cannot talk about something as it's happening. We have to look back at it, right? We have to individually process it before we can collectively process it. So maybe when Chess is coming out in the mid 80s, and it actually had a pretty healthy run in London, it tanked in New York, which we'll talk about more in just a minute because, boy, that left a bad taste in the mouths of the ABBA creators. But I wonder if it was just too close, right? It was
it's like we need time to reflect. But I mean, the European audiences did not. I mean, Chess did do very well in Europe. But part of that is because they have a history of processing events not only afterwards, but in real time, trying to process them in real time, in their history. I mean, you look back at Brecht and Artaud, and then you look at the absurdists and all these guys that are working after the wars. This is, even in musical theater, this is what they do. Yeah. They look at what they're seeing, they look at the patterns, and they talk about what is art's responsibility to this? It becomes very artistic very quickly, and it's not as I don't know, when I look at Chess, I'm like, it has such artistry to it. It's maybe not as entertaining as Americans need it to be to stay awake. Did I say that out loud? I said that out loud. I put that on. I'm sorry, but I mean, it's very difficult.
Yeah.
But oh my gosh, you do Chess at a university, all of a sudden you've got all these kids that are like, I love this show because it's deep and it's got, there's so much to it. And they feel like they discovered something because it's not splashed all over TikTok. You don't have like a Chess TikTok channel. Someone will come back now and be like, yes, coming. There is. Yes. Yes. But you know what I mean? Like Chess is different. It feels very European. I mean, it feels very European, much more than it feels American.
Absolutely. And that, owes to its creative team, right?
And most of the time, I don't even include it in American musical theater. I include it as part of that
British invasion.
Yeah,
no question. I saw a production at the Alliance Theater in Atlanta in probably the late 90s. I don't remember
Yeah.
exactly when. I was like you, completely befuddled. All I knew of Chess was that song I Know Him So Well because Whitney
Yes.
Houston had recorded it.
Mm-hmm.
So I had it on an album that I had
You're like,
gotten
oh,
in
I
like
know this one.
1987.
Yeah.
It's like I can't wait to get to this number.
Yeah.
But other than that, I knew nothing going in. It wasn't a day and age when I was savvy enough to dig into it and know what I was going into. So I just go in cold and I was completely like, what? Say who? I will say, and the reason I bring up the timing of things is because there is a presumably Broadway bound revival that is
Yeah.
helmed by Michael Mayer, who directed Spring Awakening, who directed A Beautiful Noise, that we'll be talking about next week. He is the director of this chess revival. So I'm curious to
Yeah.
see now that we are removed several decades from the end of the Cold War, I'm curious to see if it will play better this time in for American audiences. Who
Well, I mean,
knows?
yeah. I mean, it's the right time in the cycle for it,
Yeah,
you know,
exactly. I agree.
to come back.
I agree.
Just is the will the message get drowned in the
Right.
idea that, the post Cold War communism, like, anyway, lots to say there. We can talk about that when it comes out. I'm really
Yeah,
excited to see
that's
it.
right. I'm sure it'll go on tour, so we'll have a big conversation about it. So at any rate, the show premieres in London in 1986 and then on Broadway in 1988. It plays a very healthy, I think, 2 years in London. I may be wrong on that, but it definitely played well in London. Did not play well in New York, and this really gave, I mean, Benny and Bjorn, the two songwriters from ABBA, blamed the review of Frank Rich. I read a review of Frank
Really?
Rich when we were talking about Crazy for You. So again, this guy is the chief New York Times theater critic at this point in history, and he reviews ABBA. I'm sorry, not ABBA. He reviews Chess, and it was such a stern and unfavorable review that um, it destroyed the show. And
Yeah.
well, who knows if it destroyed the show? Benny and Bjorn certainly criticized him for that. In fact, they said outright, Frank Rich killed Chess dead. So Rich, this is what he said of it. Frank Rich called the show a suite of temper tantrums, all amplified to a piercing pitch that would not be out of place in a musical about one of Chess's somewhat noisier fellow sports like stock car racing.
Huh. But listen to what he's saying. These are people who are having tantrums, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Like, and but I mean, if you're trying to process something that's big, but
yeah,
somebody's trying to talk to you about it before you've processed it, like, it's often that you're like, yeah, run your mouth until I've
yeah.
processed it. I can't do this with you. It makes sense. It's kind of what we've been saying this whole time. We were
Right.
not ready for it.
No,
Americans are not ready for it.
no, absolutely not. Absolutely not. But remember how ABBA had been already leery of the American audience
Mm-hmm.
because they were not as popular on the radio in the US as they were literally everywhere
Everywhere
else in the
else.
world. And so until they could headline their own shows in the US, they would not tour here.
Mm-hmm.
So it was just another like strike one in the 70s when the US doesn't receive their music as warmly as the rest of the world. Strike two in 1988 when Frank Rich says that this is like a bunch of people having a tantrum or acting like stock car NASCAR drivers,
Yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Strike two, man. ABBA, I mean, I keep talking about Benny and Bjorn as if they are ABBA, which in a way they are, but
Yeah.
but Anderson and Ulvaeus or Benny and Bjorn, they are deeply wounded by this.
Yeah.
They love the process of working in the musical theater space. The album, this was released. It was one of those concept albums that was released as a 2 LP set
Mm-hmm.
and sold like crazy,
Uh-huh.
enormously popular. But nevertheless, the fact that it did not play in New York was deeply hurtful to Benny and Bjorn. And
Did it go on
they
tour? Did
What's
they
that?
did they pull the tour? I
I
don't
do not know
remember.
that. I don't recall. I may have known that at some point, but I
And
don't recall at this
I don't
moment.
remember seeing it. Granted, I was 12.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
I was 100% like very in tune with what was coming through Los Angeles, but
Yes, I'm
I'm
sure.
like, I don't remember chess. So,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I don't remember either. But nevertheless, it was a
yeah.
deep hurt. And so they continue to do some little things. They would write little pop cantatas.
Pop
They would
cantatas.
write, just little things that were in a longer form, not just a 3-minute song, but in a longer form, not quite another full musical, but nevertheless, they're kind of playing around in this space. Then they do get to a point where they do try to write, they take like, I believe it was some kind of Norwegian or maybe Finnish or Danish trilogy and turn it into a musical.
Hmm.
Scandinavian at least. I don't know which of the particular countries. And they try to turn this trilogy of books into a musical and do not something anybody who's listening to this has probably ever heard of. I was not familiar with it until I researched for my book. But nevertheless, they're still interested in writing musical theater. They just don't want to have anything to do with the US. And can you blame them? But
No.
those were the two strikes. US didn't like us on the radio. We had to wait to tour there. And then Frank Rich killed Chess dead. I mean,
This
that's a
is
direct quote.
this is what everybody went through as the world. What, Thomas Friedman, right? He's the one that said the world is flat. The world is becoming flat, right?
Oh, yes, yes,
As
yes.
that's happening, we're still, it's like artists want to believe that everything is, this is a global art,
Yeah,
and it is not. Just like the
right.
United States very early on was very regionalized.
Absolutely.
We have not become like a one world art focus where everybody's, it's still very much, by continent at this point,
Yeah,
and they're trying to make it so I mean, good on them. They're part of that kind of, globalization movement, but
yeah.
it's rocky and rough as we try to make that happen.
Yeah. Yep. Well, the in addition to producing that concept album of Chess, which was very successful, and the production of Chess, which was very successful in the West End, or successful enough in the West End, um, their collaboration with Tim Rice on Chess introduced them to a woman named Judy Kramer. And Judy Kramer had worked on Cats with Andrew Lloyd Webber, and then had ultimately and as a I think she was an assistant stage manager, maybe an assistant producer, but I think it was stage manager. In fact, I'm pretty sure of that. But what she really wanted to do was produce. She just didn't know what she wanted to produce. So after she leaves the company of Cats, she goes and works for Tim Rice, kind of as an assistant, sort
Mm-hmm.
of works within his production company. And she meets Ben and Bjorn through the process of Chess. She did not know anything about ABBA's music. She had been more of a Led Zeppelin fan when she was,
Yeah.
when ABBA was going strong, she was listening to Led Zeppelin and other things and wasn't really into pop music like that. And
It seems
so,
like everybody says that though.
yeah,
And then
maybe
all
so.
of a sudden they know everybody's words. Like,
Right, exactly,
it's very
exactly. I would
interesting.
never listen to that.
You're like, I was just not into that at that point. You're
No,
like, okay.
no, no. So she hears from, she meets Benny and Bjorn and knows them from working with them throughout the production of Chess, but she doesn't really know their music. And so someone made her a cassette, a mixtape,
A
basically,
mixtape.
a mixtape, made her a mixtape of ABBA's greatest hits. And she is consumed with it. She is so in love with this music. In fact, she got to the point, and we've all been there if we are children of this particular era, where the tape was so worn that she would have to use a pencil to rewind it. When your tapes would get to that
Hmm.
point, you'd have
Or when
to manually
it
rewind.
would eat it, and you have to sit there because you didn't want to lose
Yes.
it. And
Yes, exactly. That's where she was. That's where she was. She loved their music so much, and she thought, well, this is what I want to do. This is what I want to produce. I want to produce a musical using ABBA's music. Now, this is the mid 90s.
hmm
I have already said we have talked ad nauseum about the fact that this idea of a catalog musical, or what we would now refer to as a jukebox musical, was the by far the exception rather than the rule. So the fact that this
Well, they're
woman,
also all dying. Like there's lots of them, and they're all closing immediately.
Right.
And she's still like, no, this one's going to work. No one liked chess, but this one's going to work.
Trust me, I know. And she just kept believing, this is what I'm going to do. This is what I'm going to do. This is the thing. I need to do this. She just kept going. Well, she took it to Benny and Bjorn, and what do you think they said?
No.
Ain't no way you're taking my music to Broadway. No chance. Why? Because Frank Rich killed Chess dead.
Yeah, no.
And the Americans don't like ABBA.
Yeah.
Right? Strike one, strike two, you ain't doing it again, right? And so she just keeps going and going and going like the Energizer Bunny. She just keeps saying, come on, I think this will work. Come on, I think this will work. And she tries a couple of different things. Again, I describe it in my book. So if you want to know more, check out chapter 2 of Jukebox Musicals. I won't go into it here, but she tries a couple of different ways of using ABBA's music in a Muppet style puppet retelling of a show. You know, there's all kinds of interesting things that she does, all with the ultimate goal of putting the music of ABBA on stage, and is increasingly met with resistance from Benny and Bjorn. But over time, she starts to wear them down, and they begin to say, okay, maybe you can give this a try, but we can't really be deeply involved. The book that I mentioned, a trilogy, it's actually a tetralogy of books that they were trying to turn into a musical. It was called Christina from Duvamala. I'm certainly mispronouncing that. But it was a tetralogy of mid-century novels by a Swedish author named Vilhelm Moberg. So they were deeply invested in trying to musicalize that tetralogy. They did say to Kramer, you keep doing what you're doing, that's fine, but we cannot be a part of it. We cannot be a part of it. And so in the intervening years, a couple of things happen. By this point, this is the early 90s, and we have a couple of things that give a little bit of life to the ABBA catalog, and that really gave momentum to Kramer as she kept going back and back and back to Benny and Bjorn. Number one was the release of ABBA Gold, which was a greatest hits album that came out, I believe, in 1992. But it's a great, I had that album in 1992. It was an unbelievable album of great music.
And they were selling them at Costco.
How about that?
I know that sounds weird, but remember, Costco had just become a thing then, and you'd all go on Saturday. And I remember that album. That's where my parents got their copy.
And that's where they would sell. I remember they would sell, like, the CD would be like because in a
your parents,
cardboard sleeve. Remember that? How it would be in a...
But your parents aren't going to the Sam Goody like you are. Remember? I mean, it actually is kind of happening at the right moment.
Yes, that does make sense.
Right moment, because we've actually switched the generations, because the generations that should have been listening to ABBA now have kids of their own, and they're listening to grunge music, and that generation is rolling their eyes like, what is this horrible music
absolutely
these children are listening to?
Yes,
and
absolutely.
Then ABBA Gold comes out, and I mean, that's where I remember it. I don't remember it being at Sam Goody. Like, that's where Nirvana was.
No, I don't remember where I got it. I actually think I encountered it a couple of years later by way of Muriel's Wedding. Like, Muriel's Wedding comes out in 1994, which was an Australian independent film that it's about a girl named Muriel who is obsessed with ABBA. And in fact, she gets married, and as she walks down the aisle, it's to ABBA's song, I Do, I Do, I Do, I Do. And then, so there was ABBA Gold hits like 1992, Muriel's Wedding hits 1994. There was also
okay, I know that this is going to sound weird. I'm going to input this.
What's that?
I also think that it was ABBA Gold was remastered to work on CD.
Oh, possibly, yeah.
And then CDs, everybody's getting their first CD player, so everybody's longing for CDs.
Yes,
and so
probably.
And they are not going back to their favorite pop music and re-releasing everything on CD. Like, it takes so many years to do that. So this is like the first kind of pop music they can get their hands on.
So it was
My
available
brain
to
is
listen
firing.
to.
I was
Yeah,
like,
that makes
oh my
perfect
gosh,
sense.
this is
Yeah.
okay.
It was all in the timing, no doubt about it. So
Yeah.
92, ABBA Gold's out, and then 94, there are two Australian films. Now remember, ABBA had been as popular all over the world as they were in Sweden, with the exception of in the US. So there are two Australian films, one of them directed by PJ Hogan, that's Muriel's Wedding, that I knew and loved. The other is called The Adventures of Priscilla, Queen of the Desert.
Yep.
Which had another Australian film, 1994, which had an ABBA infused soundtrack. So all of these things are happening at once, and you're right. I'm sure there was a generation.
It was
It was
just on the other side of
primed,
it. Yeah.
just primed for this resurgence of ABBA to take place. And this is when Judy Kramer is like pushing and pushing and pushing and begging Benny and Bjorn to let her do it. They say, okay, we can't help you, but you can try it. And so she keeps, I mean, she is the engine of the Mamma Mia machine. And you cannot overstate the importance of Judy Kramer here. And so, of course, as she decides she's going to try this, she needs to have a librettist. She has no idea of the story she wants to tell. She just knows she wants to use these songs in a musical. Full stop. She has no idea what else to do. Well, through a series of events, she is introduced to a woman named Katherine Johnson, who is a British playwright, and had won a playwriting competition. It's kind of an interesting story. She was like a single mom of one who was about to deliver her second baby, and she was desperate for some kind of income. And so she enters a play that she writes in like 3 days in a competition. And then she wins the competition, and of course, her life has changed completely. She had told her mother, "I'm going to enter this contest, and if I lose, I'm going back to college or going to become an EMT or something like that, you know." And she ends up winning. And so, through a series of events and connections and colleagues, she is connected with Katherine Johnson, who would be the librettist of Mamma Mia. And they meet one day, I believe it was at the end of 96-ish, if not 97. Must have been the end of 96 because it premiered in London in 98. I'm maybe getting my dates mixed up. I probably am. But at any rate, late 90s, and they sit down at the end of the year and they have this big, long 3-hour lunch in which they go through ideas for what kind of a story they could tell. And a couple of interesting...
Why does this make sense that this is two ladies over some sort of power lunch?
Oh, yeah. 1,000%. 1,000%.
Ooh, I have an idea. What if?
Right. Exactly. But what's interesting that comes up as they are talking about it is how they realize that there are really two types of music that ABBA sings. It seems like they're singing from two different generations, the vantage points of two different generations. You have very hopeful and youthful sounding songs like Honey, Honey, and then you have songs that are much more seem to be written in retrospect of something like The Winner Takes It All. Yeah. And so as they're discussing this never-ending lunch meeting, they realize you've got to have two generations represented in the telling of this story because that catalog requires it, right? This is not just all honey, honey, and I do, and Mamma Mia, here I go again. This is also, I don't want to talk about things we've gone through. You know what I mean? Like there is
astute. And another one of those things we said, it's like, this is not easy to structure.
No.
You have to be able to find things like that in the music. Like you need two generations. We know that. So now what do we do?
Right. And so that's when they come up with, very early on in their conversations, so like, if we're going to do this, we need a mother character and a daughter character. There has to be two different generations represented. In fact, Johnson said, "We knew that most musicals required young and beautiful leading characters, yet we knew that the subject matter of the ABBA songs meant we'd have to write about a romance that would end in a breakup. If you have two young people breaking up, the audience, especially the bitter 40-year-olds, will think, so what if they break up? They're only young. They'll meet someone else." And that's when we decided the story had to be about two generations.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. And so, they wrap up their lunch. Kramer says to Johnson, "Okay, go home, think about it, and when you come up with something, call me." And Johnson, who's desperate for work because she's got to feed her children,
Yeah.
she doesn't want the conversation to end because she's afraid if it ends, we'll never get back to talking about it. And so she says to Kramer, she just blurts it out. As Kramer is getting up to go, she says, "Well, what if the mother had slept with three men and she didn't know which of them was the baby's father?" And Kramer was like, "Sit back down." You got my interest, girl.
And you've had too much Prosecco. Like,
very possible. Very possible. Very possible.
Three different men. That just...
Yes.
Oh, good grief. I was always just like, why three?
Right.
Why not
just
two? Why three?
Right. Well, I will give you a little bit of insight into that.
Why, but it's like, oh, good grief.
Yeah. So we must acknowledge here that that plot is similar in some of its points to a 1969 film called Buena Sera, Mrs. Campbell, which starred Shelley Winters and Telly Savalas. And it's about a woman who has taken money from three different men, all of whom believe they are the father of her child. Oh. And then at the end, they all get together to try to figure out who is really the father of the child. So similar in some of it, though not all of it. But nevertheless, I do want to point out a similar story existed, though it was not it may have been in Johnson's subconscious as she blurted that out. You know what I mean? Yeah. It was not an adaptation per se of that movie. It was just perhaps in the backs of their minds as they were talking about it. So at any rate, they have their basic idea, and Johnson takes off in 1997. So it would have been the end of 96 when they had that meeting. By Easter of 97, she has enough of a script that she can share it with Bjorn Ulvaeus, who was the lyricist of Benny and Bjorn. And he was, at this point, fully on board. He's like, "That sounds awesome. I am on board." Benny Anderson, the music composer, was not. He was still like, "I am not here with you." But he trusted Bjorn. They'd obviously been working together for decades. He said, "I trust this man with my life. We've made millions and millions of dollars together. So let's see if we can make a few million more. I trust him." And so they proceeded. And of course, after they had their idea and that script treatment, the next order of business was to find a director. And that's when they came across the path of Phyllida Lloyd, who, a British director, again, connected as all of theater is. It's who you know and who you've worked with and who your friends have worked with and all that. And that's how they were connected with Phyllida Lloyd, who was a graduate of drama from Birmingham University, but she'd never directed a musical. She directed a lot of operas, but never a musical. So this was a brand new thing for her, but she was nevertheless very interested in taking it on. So, long story short, we speed through this development process. We get to the script, not as it is now, but similar, in shape to what it would become. And we're ready for a production. You will not believe who signs on to be, who offers them a house where they can perform. Only Cameron McIntosh, producer of Cats and fan of all those British invasion musicals. Yeah, but Cameron McIntosh.
He has a history of doing these little house
yes,
house readings, so that doesn't surprise me as much as it probably should.
Exactly. And so he says, "You know what? I'm going to offer you the Prince Edward Theater, where, interestingly, Chess had played 10 years prior."
And they're
how about that?
Please let it be okay here, too.
Right. Right. And so
and this is in London, right?
This is in London. It premiered in the West End. Mm-hmm. So this is in London. And just from the very beginning, audience responses were outrageous. It was originally called Summer Night City, which is another ABBA song. And at the beginning, before they officially opened, they had a lot of the creators, anyway, Phyllida Lloyd, Judy Kramer, Katherine Johnson, they were aware that the opening number did not work. It was this big splashy number about summer night city, but in reality, they weren't in a city. They were on this Greek island, right? So it didn't really work, and they were all bothered by it, but had no idea
how to fix it.
And then one night, a family member of one of the company members saw the show in previews and wrote a letter to Philida Lloyd.
Mm-hmm.
And listen to this.
Hmm.
In that letter, he wrote, "You're trying to be something you'll never be. You're trying to be a big, blowsy Broadway show. And in fact, this is an intimate domestic story. You should be starting with the plot. Forget all about the fandango. Open with why we should be interested in this story." And so that's when the light bulb, this is just before they open. This is just before the show is frozen. That's when the light bulb came on for Lloyd. And she's like, okay, we're going to start with Sophie writing those invitations to her dad or
Mm-hmm.
potential dads to come to her or reading her mom's journal, right?
Yeah.
She reads the mom's journal and then sends the invitations to her dads, right? We're going to start with that, immediately getting into the heartbeat of the story. And of course, that's how they froze the show. That's how the show opened. And from day one, it was outrageously popular with audiences. I mean, it's impossible to see this show and not be lit up like a glowworm the entire time. It is so much fun.
It does. It is really interesting that it's like the simple opening is what worked
Yes.
to kind of move it. If you remember that last season, that's exactly what happened with Oklahoma.
Yes.
The big splashy opening, and
That's
somebody
right.
literally had to say to them, "This is not what this is about."
Yeah.
So then
That's
it
a
just ends
great
up
point.
just being Curly, just talking about kind of the set, setting the scene and what he needs from his life. It does open pretty simply. I remember going, "Wow, there's a lot of narration here." Like Sophie does do a lot of chatting about this is what's happening at this moment.
Yes.
And
Exposition.
so,
Yeah.
a lot of exposition that usually is more tightly wound into there. But I totally agree that if it had started with something big and flashy, I would have been like, okay, now I have no idea where I'm going.
Yeah. It doesn't
Right?
work.
Yeah.
Yeah. It doesn't work. So, I mean, it's almost like that's kind of a deus ex machina.
Yeah.
That letter arriving is out of Greek tragedy, right? Like,
God
I'm going
from
to
the
save the
machine.
day. Yeah, exactly. I'm going to save the day. This unnamed family member, I'm sure somebody knows his name.
Somebody
I
knows
do
who
not
that
know his
is.
name.
Yeah.
Writes this letter and changes the
mean,
trajectory
what
of
chutzpah,
theater
though.
history. What's that?
What chutzpah, though?
Oh, no doubt.
Like, my kid finally gets into a show. Now I'm going to write to the director and be like, "You've totally gummed this thing up.
Right.
Don't do
Right.
this." And didn't
Right.
tell him what to do, but said, "I've lost the story already if you start
Yeah.
like this." Interesting.
It's fascinating. So at any rate, so they open in London. It's a big, big hit. Of course, they open in London because Benny and Bjorn were like, we are not giving Frank Rich a chance to destroy our livelihood again.
No.
So they open in the West End at the Prince Edward Theater where Chess had played a decade earlier. And
95?
97.
It was 97 when it opened in, oh gosh.
Let me be, you know what? And I could be wrong about that date. It might be, let's see, hang on. I can't find it. It was late 90s. Let's call it late 90s because it opened in the US in 2001, but that was after,
Yeah.
I don't know the
It
exact
had
date.
been, I mean, everybody was talking about Mamma Mia by the time it got here.
Yes. Well,
I mean-
and that was by design.
Yeah.
That was by design. So what they did was, critical response was mixed as you would expect it to be. However, audience response was off the charts.
Yeah.
And so,
I
that
had
opening-
the CD before it even got here.
yes. There is, in fact, that's probably the better selling of the two cast recordings is the West End
London,
recording
yeah.
rather than the Broadway.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the opening night, that kind of mega mix at the end of the show where everybody's standing up dancing, Judy Kramer says to Biddy and Bjorn, "I told you so. I told you so." And they were obviously thrilled to be proven wrong. But then what happened was it became clear, as the box office is, the phone is ringing off the wall in the box office, producers from the US and Canada are also burning up the phone line saying, hey, we got to get this show over here.
Mm-hmm.
And so again, the decision is made. We're not starting in New York. We're going to do exactly what they did with that 1979 ABBA tour of North America. And they started with a sit down company in Toronto. They started in Canada. They had a sit down company in Toronto for I don't know how many months. And then they had a tour that started in San Francisco and played, I want to say 14, it might be, I don't remember the exact number, but not a lot, but also not two cities
Yeah.
across the US. And the thinking was, we'll generate excitement so that we know kind of how we can expect to be received in New York by the time we get there. So Frank Rich cannot chess us again.
You know
Right?
what? And it's interesting because it's like, okay, so we lived through this part of it, and I was on the
Yeah.
West Coast, and you were on the East Coast. And
Yes.
I remember it coming through Los Angeles, and I specifically didn't see it there because everyone that I was talking to, all of my friends, all the people who were involved in theater, were a little irked that it was doing what it was doing. It's like,
Yeah.
no, you go to Broadway first. Like, what are you doing to these people? Like, this is insane. Like,
Yes.
this doesn't make any sense. This isn't helping us. This isn't helping us with a large tour later. You have to go to Broadway first because, so many people were talking about, like, there's this tour that we weren't even able to audition for, like,
Right.
we weren't able
Right.
to do anything, and this is not how this works. And so many people were irked about it. I didn't see it either because everybody was like, because of that, it was like this thing in the theater community where people were going, well, it's badly written and blah blah
Of
blah
course.
blah blah blah
Of
blah, blah, blah.
course.
But notice, audiences loved it, and nobody really
Loved
knew what
it.
to do with that because the theater community was irked. Like,
Yes.
what are you doing? And on the same kind of coin, but it is selling out.
Oh yeah, selling out all across at every
And
stop.
it hasn't even gotten to Broadway yet.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. So it's supposed to open at the Winter Garden Theater in September of 2001. Yes,
Which
exactly.
you just gotta go, okay, you guys just have bad luck.
Bad luck.
Bad timing.
Bad mojo. Yes, exactly. And so, they're in the Winter Garden practicing as the towers are falling, right? And so after, several days after 9/11, the production team got everybody in the company together and they sat and had a meeting and were like, okay, so what should we do? We're supposed to open, but what should we do? And they had one member of the company who said, well, I'll tell you what we shouldn't do. And it is this show. It's inappropriate. But then there was another member of the company who said, actually, this is exactly what we should be doing because this is why we do what we do, right? In this moment in time, we are going to give the escape that New Yorkers and that the world needs from this tragic occurrence. We're going to be the escape for them that they need. And that's why we make this kind of art. And ultimately, it was that way of thinking that won out, partially because Mayor Rudolph Giuliani specifically said, please open.
Yeah.
Please, we need you. We need people to come back to Broadway.
Yeah.
And I'm sure at some point, though I don't remember exactly when, but I'm sure we have talked about that iconic commercial with Bernadette Peters and Nathan Lane begging, yes, and BB Newirth begging people to come back to New York. And this was part of that campaign. So it opens in New York in October of 2001, and the rest is history. We all know it is, as always, a critical, mix and
But look at then there are two musicals. You've got Chess that opens late 80s at a time where
88
the
in
US
New York.
doesn't really want to have to wrap their brain around hard things.
Yes.
And then we have the fun, entertaining musical that they open at exactly the right time because we need a little bit of that escapism. It's
Exactly.
like one is too heady, one is not. I'd say it's a bunch of fun, y'all. It's not.
So
it's not
much.
meant to be anything more than
So much.
You're just everybody's
So
supposed
much.
to go and have fun, and that's the whole
Exactly.
point. and it's able to kind of fill that slot, because the only other major thing that's gets up and running then is Urinetown, and Urinetown is very don't yet. Urinetown, very Brechtian, very much like not as heady as chess in any way, shape, or form, but has a lot of the same kind of European influences on
Absolutely.
it. And it's trying to, make everybody happy with its title called Urinetown.
Yeah.
So, I mean, this is the thing that everybody's like, I just need to not think about everything that's happening around me. Let's go see some poor woman have to figure out which one is her dad.
Yes, right. Exactly. And let's just, man, gosh, at the end of that, I don't know what to call it, but a mega mix, which is ripped from Joseph.
Yep.
The mega mix. That is the most fun you can have in a theater. Mm-hmm. And so this show, of course, changed the course of theater history, because if you look at the jukebox musicals that have come since then, almost every single one of them, as you're digging into the backstory, one of the creators will say, well, I watched Mamma Mia and I began to think about because
the amount of money it made.
The amount of money. Yes.
It broke all, I mean, it was a big wake up call, I think, to the theater community as well, who were more the purists, who were all looking at it and going, this is making so much money though. Like, what we cannot afford to be the purists that we need to start taking a look at what this is and saying, why is this working? What is going on here? That's bringing people back to the theater. Like, what's happened? And I think that's a whole bunch of social causes, all kind of pulled from lots of different threads that answer, but it really meant that we had to gather around this genre a little bit more. And it took a long time for, I think, the theater community to do it, but it did not take the audiences any time at all.
No. It absolutely did not. So, this is, Tracy's right. We should have started here because this is the benchmark. This sets the trajectory for the next 2 decades, from 2001 until 2025. This is still the benchmark.
Yeah.
Mamma Mia is now back on Broadway for the first time. I mean, it played for a long time, but then it is now back. This is its first revival. It's back at the Winter Garden where it started. So, I'm sure Benny and Bjorn have never been more thankful to be wrong than they are in the case of
And I'm thankful that Americans finally caught up with what they were doing.
Absolutely.
You just got to give us some time, Benny. Like, Benny and Bjorn, just give us a little bit of time. We'll come through for you.
We can be slow on the uptake. No doubt about it. No doubt about it. All right. Well, on that note, that will do it for this episode of the Dr. Broadway podcast. Tune in next time. We'll be talking about A Beautiful Noise, the Neil Diamond musical, which opened on Broadway in, 2023? 2022. Perfect. 2022. And so we'll have lots to say about that.
2022. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. 2022. But it's one that takes its lead not from Mamma Mia as a fantasy kind of musical, but rather from Jersey Boys as a bio-musical, and we'll get more into that next week. So join us then when we talk about A Beautiful Noise. Until then, connect with us via email at hello@drbroadway.com or on Instagram, YouTube, or TikTok at Dr. Bway Podcast.